tell me to stop.
Okay, so this afternoon's proceedings is the Freedom Camping bylaw recommendations, site designations. So we've got Fern Morris, Compliance Team Leader, Alicia Paulson, Asset Strategy and Development Manager, and Kate Beard, Asset Manager Officer, joining us for this part of the afternoon. So welcome team, everybody. And we've got Samantha as one of the advisors up there, Samantha Strong, up there to answer questions as we go. And I dare say we'll see Chief Callum arrive at some stage as well. So that's me. I'll throw it straight over to you guys to lead the way with this.
Thank you. Okay, so we want to split this workshop into 3 parts. I want to spend like the first 30 minutes just talking about what our obligations are and do a quick review of our enforcement options. Vern has helpfully put together a table for us so we can talk you through that. And then the middle section of the workshop, I wanted you guys to be able to ask Thrive any questions you have and have some of that discussion that you started having in the council meeting, but have them answer some questions that I was unable to answer, having not been expert in freedom camping law. And then the last part of the workshop, I thought it would be really useful if we work through all of the sites that we've come up with and have, again, that discussion that we didn't have in the council meeting. So, but if you have any questions as we go through, just ask them. Sorry. That's totally fine as well. Yeah. So firstly, our obligations as council. So I briefly touched on this in the council meeting. So under the Freedom Camping Act 2011, we have to permit freedom camping. So we don't have any choice in that. So the Act doesn't recognise that we'll have areas as council that we do not want to have freedom camping permitted. We can implement a bylaw which can identify where freedom camping can be prohibited and restricted. But we have to follow the rules set out in the legislation and only restrict or prohibit the areas based on 3 criteria. The first one is to protect the area. The second one is to protect the health and safety of people who may visit the area. And the third one is to protect the access to the area. So all of these areas must be assessed against these 3 criteria before any restrictions or prohibitions are applied to ensure that our bylaw satisfies the bylaw legislation, which is that is appropriate, proportionate, consistent and defensible. So that means that then once we do that as a council, then we have to go out for 1-month public consultation through a special consultative procedure, and that's part of the bylaw legislation. So I think that's just really important to understand. I'm not standing up here saying I'm an advocate of freedom camping. I'm also not standing up here saying I'm not an advocate of freedom camping, just telling you like what the law is, what we have to do. One of the questions you asked as well at the council meeting, which was totally valid, was what's the minimum viable product we'll get away with. There's no legislation saying what the minimum is, what the maximum is. We just have to assess all our sites, or our whole district in fact, based on legislation, and then decide as a district how freedom camping friendly will be and make reasonable suggestions as well within our bylaw. Another thing is, and Ashley brought this up as well, there's been changes into the self-containment rules. So it's important now to know that from next year, vehicles will have to be certified self-contained. So it's not the let's have a bucket in the car thing, it's an actual fixed toilet, and we'll be moving from blue stickers to green stickers. And there's a transition period, as I said before, so just from now until next year. So this season you'll still get kind of the mix of the green and the blue stickers, but next season you'll only see the green stickers. Yeah.
From a fellow white baiter, Gary, who works in Greymouth and certifies the motor vehicles, etc. He said that from now on they are doing this process.
Yeah. So at the moment
he said he had over 2,000 booked in.
Yeah, so at the moment we're in the middle of the transition period. Yeah. The transition period started last year, and I said it'll move on to next year. And so some people will already have the stickers, some people won't. And that regulation is for private vehicles and commercial as well. So all of your juicy camper vans, all that sort of stuff will all be going out to get those.
I was a guy from Christchurch that was doing that a couple of years ago. He was making a huge amount of money, but he wasn't putting toilets in.
Don't help it.
People parked up next to public toilets. Yeah.
So under the bylaw, we have the choice. So the Freedom Camping Act only refers to certified self-contained, but in our bylaw, we can allow for non-self-contained and certified self-contained, vehicles. So we have that choice. So in the current proposed bylaw, which I drafted, I put some sites for non-self-contained and some sites for certified self-contained and some for both. But you as the council have a choice to restrict the whole district to certified self-contained. That's an option.
So we're going to be changing the classification of freedom campers to self-contained New Zealand, basically, hopefully.
Well, you have that choice. You have the option. Yeah.
Right. Because I think that's half the problem, well, not half the problem, but it's part of the problem is that everybody gets thrown into that freedom camping category.
Yep.
Yeah, we've got a lot of responsible campers, and we've got a lot that aren't. And we've got a lot that just don't care about the footprint that they leave behind in our country. So
you've got the whole spectrum.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got from the car campers all out to the $200,000 RVs.
And just on that too is that I've got a letter that I've got to Minister Ducey tomorrow for tourism, and that's also being supported by other councils around the country. We are now demanding that they have a conversation with the rental companies of the camper vans, because they still have that $50 rebate if they don't use the camper vans, their toilets.
Oh.
That is still in place. They've been told to stop that, and we're recommending that they actually fine those companies for non-enforcement. And that indicates the sentiment around the country with this. So there's a few things that are happening there with the Minister regarding that. You know, we're expecting to step up to the plate. Well, it's time they did too.
So there's a whole raft of standards, and you can look them up if you want to, that set out what the certified self-contained park means.
So you say that it's up to us to draft the bylaw, as long as we're within the parameters of the legislation, but is there any independent check or government check on what we come up with to check that it is fit for purpose, that it
Our bylaw?
Yes, the spirit of the legislation.
So there's not like a government check, if that makes sense, but someone like the NZCMA, I don't know if that's the Caravan Association, they will likely read it during the consultation period, and they can challenge us on that.
We could hypothetically allow one site in the whole of Westland, and that would...
No, I don't think we get away with that.
When you say you don't think we'd get away with it, other than German Backpackers of New Zealand Incorporated or something like that, who would actually challenge our bylaws?
So exactly, that New Zealand Motorhome and Caravan Association. So 2 weeks ago, Queenstown Lakes was in the paper. So their bylaw got ruled invalid because they had tried to prohibit freedom camping in too many areas because it wasn't judged as being reasonable. And their reasoning behind that was the community didn't want it, and it wasn't evidence-based based on the 3 criteria that I just listed to you before. So it wasn't about protecting the area, it wasn't about access to the area, and it wasn't about cultural or ecological significance. So,
And 7 years ago, we had the same situation going on, and NCA were threatening taking us to court, this council to court for, wanting to do things differently.
Lovely group of people.
well, there will be other people as well. That's just a good example because they're the ones that have, in the media quite a lot and I guess passionate about that as well.
So once the bylaw is in place, how difficult is it to change something in that bylaw?
Your bylaw is generally reviewed every 5 years.
Right.
Yeah. So you'd have to wait another 5 years unless you wanted to bring it forward.
So it's
Yeah.
You can bring it.
You can bring them forward. There's no.
It'd be a cost to amend that.
it's really important to get it right.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it is important we get the bylaw right for sure. Yeah. So just the next slide is just about the bylaw itself. So we have written the bylaw. It's worth noting that council staff have used the LGNZ template and.
So I'll still one question, we may get to this, but how often is enforcement action taken and how often is it successful? So say I fly into the country, I buy myself in a steamer for 6 weeks, I do whatever I feel like doing, and then I leave, and I've got some fines being chased after me by Westland District Council, but I'm sitting pretty back in Vienna or somewhere else by then. Like, how easy is it to actually execute those fines?
Won't be coming back. Pretty much, you'll have a warranty for to arrest issued against your name.
Right.
If you did that circumstances you outlined. Yeah. But these days it's tagged to the hiring company. So if you're.
So it's not a hiring company, it's a purchasing
It's
company.
just some esteem the van, that's your individual.
Yeah,
If it's-
bought it in Auckland, sold it in Wanaka, something like that,
Yeah,
yeah.
so if it's a Maui van, that your credit card number will be billed by the company that you hired the vehicle from.
Yeah.
So there's,
So the enforcement action is generally successful.
yeah, I think it is, yeah.
I think it's got better. It's not better than what it used to.
It's fairly strict, it's like a COF, the numbers, I was looking at the infringements that you can issue, and if the vehicle's only certified for 4 people and you've got 6 on board, that's a $400 fine. So it's fairly strict now. on the-
This would be like for a camper van that's only certified to have 4 people.
And the water system that's only set up for 4 and you've got more on board, then that's
Right.
offence. $600 for non-compliance as well.
You don't come to this, but I note in your summary of the Act that it excludes explicitly homelessness.
Yeah.
So how do we differentiate between homeless camper and a freedom camper?
Sorry, we have actually had one across the road for a few nights on and off in the last.
Yeah, so there's definitions in the Act, I don't have it off the top of my head, but I can provide that to you. But the Act only provides for like temporary freedom camping, it doesn't provide for homelessness, yeah.
Yeah, so if you're homeless, that overrides the Act, the bylaw.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure, yeah.
Which is a problem.
Yes, and if you stop on the side of the road, if you're tired and need to have a sleep, the Act also, yeah, that overrides the Act as well, because that's a safety thing. Okay, then I guess my next point was just around that our bylaw is not really any different to other councils' bylaws. Algenzi and Solvin provide freedom camping bylaw like templates and guidance, and that's what we've used to develop ours. So you haven't gone and tried to change the world on that space. The next slide is just around freedom camping statistics. So we've just put 4 kind of important points on this slide for you guys, and it just comes back to that moving towards that certified self-contained debate. There was much discussion at the council meeting about who freedom campers are, but under the new self-containment rules, and if we ban freedom camping into certified self-contained vehicles only, we are able to not have the car campers, the one that are camping not near the toilets and don't have a toilet with them and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's just important to be mindful that freedom campers do come to our district, they do spend money, they do go on the helicopter flights, they do buy food, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So just as we go along.
Not spending it on a 5-star accommodation, but they are spending it on a 5-star helicopter ride.
And that's the thing with those vans that we see everywhere, they spend their money on doing things, driving around the country living on noodles, but it's,
So just moving on to enforcement, I didn't want the enforcement for freedom camping to be a main topic of conversation today, because I said in the council meeting that we'll come back to you with enforcement options, with costs, and we could have another workshop if that's what you guys want to talk about that. But I did want you guys just to be cognizant of the enforcement when you choose the sites and where the campers will go, because I think that's really important, based on the distribution of the sites, based on how long it takes to get here, based on what the sites look like, that sort of thing. So Vern and I have come up with 5 different options for enforcement, and so I'll just briefly touch on those for you. So the first one is obviously having no freedom camping enforcement at all. Obviously there is serious negatives to that. That means that people are probably likely or could potentially be camping as uncontrolled in the communities, that sort of thing. Positives, it doesn't cost any money. Adverse media attention is again another negative, and that sort of thing. The second kind of option is community volunteers. The cost is that we could either provide the communities with petrol vouchers or high-vis vests and all that sort of thing, or we could donate money to the community for their time. That's an option. So there is some positives to that, but again, there's also some negatives. So possibly people that hate freedom camping, regulating freedom camping wouldn't be a good option. We don't really have any control over community volunteers, again, a negative point for that. But again, we might generate some income from infringements, that sort of stuff as kind of positive side.
So we talked the other day about Friends Joseph doing community monitoring.
Yeah, that was the mayor. Yeah.
So were they doing it, was that what Friends Joseph were doing? Was it a legal option? They were allowed to do that?
It wasn't legal, but we did it.
But that makes it sound like it would be potentially.
One way of that is a community monitored.
We had proper tickets printed out, and it was split up and we covered the whole area.
That makes it sound like it is a viable option.
Yeah, it is a viable option, but I wasn't here back then, but was that for parking rather than freedom?
Freedom camping.
It wasn't freedom.
Yeah, it was. Because we actually did the dock campsites as well, then Doc put somebody on the following year to manage that.
My understanding is as long as someone has a warrant of appointment, then they're able to enforce the bylaw, so we just have to make sure that those communities have warrants of appointment.
Just,
But again, that's not my area.
through the chair, there are some concerns you have to worry about health and safety issues.
Yep.
The vigilantism
Yes.
has been mentioned. The fact that they're confronting people who may not actually be very happy about getting tickets.
Yep.
And there could be some violent altercations. There has that potential, so we just have to be careful about that, because under the Health and Safety and Employment Act, are they employees, are they not?
Yeah.
You know.
Well, back when that was done at Friends, we got away with it, and I really need to stipulate we got away with it. But that was the community addressing the problem because there was nothing else happening and it was a lot of defecation going on in a lot of areas. So we just did it, we got away with it. Because say the following year, Doc came in and put patrols around their campsites and that kind of blended into the community doing less. But people did pay up.
The next two options are we could use current council staff, which isn't really an option. Bert's team is already very small and we don't have many staff in his team to work after hours. For example, we've got animal control, but that's probably about all. The next one is we could have some temporary staff that come in and do this work. But again, that's probably quite expensive, rely on ratepayer funding, that sort of thing, and we'd have to think about how we cover all of Westland. And then the last option is just around having a third-party contractor, so that's the same, that would be expensive, we'd have to have someone to come in and sort that out. So just be mindful, those are the type of things you guys need to think about, how you will enforce it when we create a bylaw.
What do you mean by the preferred second option at the bottom of the list?
Vern prefers one of the options of all the other options. Again, I think he is very keen to.
Options, obviously the first preferred one was the Indy stump up with the usual tip type fund.
Oh, okay, so this is the second most preferred option, as opposed to you prefer the second option. Yeah.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, I think it's just, we just need to be mindful about kind of what best practice is in freedom camping, whether that's written down legislation or whether that's just example of other councils being challenged in the media as well. So I've mentioned this already. So next, I thought it would be really useful for you guys to kind of have a question and answer session with Thrive. They're far more experienced in this than me. And some of the things I've asked them to kind of talk to you about was what other councils are doing in their district, how freedom camping friendly they've made their districts versus the behaviour that happens from residents or freedom camping that comes in from that. And what are the key things that you guys need to think about when making a bylaw other than the things that I've already told you. So yeah, if you guys have any questions for them, if you don't, that's fine too. Sam and Jeff, do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Sure, thanks, Alicia. Kia ora, everybody. My name's Sam Strong. I am a Recreation Open Spaces Planner, so Parks Planner at Thrive Spaces and Places. I'm actually based in the QLDC. I live in Lake Hawea and I frequent the West Coast lots during the year, so I'm very attuned to your district and appreciate all of its beauty. And yeah, we've been doing a few freedom camping assessments over the past 2 years as this legislation has changed. And that's what I've been involved with Thrive. But Jeff's also been involved in freedom camping assessments all the way from when the act came into play in 2011. So I'll pass it off to Jeff. Oh, you're on mute, Jeff. Yes, apologies. Jeff is he's attending the World Urban Parks Congress in the Netherlands right now. So yes, he's overseas.
Morena, can you hear me? Very good. Kia ora koutou. My name's Jeff Cannon, so I'm the Principal Parks and Recreation Specialist with Thrive Spaces and Places. Yes, I've been working with the Freedom Camping Act since it came in. Firstly with Auckland Council when they were grappling for the very reason for it, for the Rugby World Cup. And then ever since with Assessment Centre Sam saying with the most recent changes, and worked quite closely with many councils right around the country and all the way through to the High Court. So yeah, this is a great conversation you're having. I've heard it and you're covering all the points really well. So we're open for questions.
Questions?
Sam, Stephen here. Have you had a look at the proposed bylaw that we're discussing today?
Yes, we have. And Alicia and Kate have done a fabulous job of drafting up a draft bylaw for you guys to check out. I think one of the things I'd like to touch on, I did watch the previous council meeting when the initial bylaw was proposed. And just about talking about who your campers are. There's been a lot of narrative talked around your table about potentially singularly international tourists. But I think you need to look at that the spectrum of tourists that you get as freedom campers range from your domestic tourists all the way to international, as well as the types of vehicles that they're driving. So yes, I live in the QLDC. I totally get it. I see those, the typical backpackers in their low budget vehicles that are driving around and trying to save on accommodation rather than putting their money into hotels and motels, rather they can camp for free but spend on experiences. But now you've got the spectrum, even post-COVID, that you have a lot of domestic tourists in their large, expensive vehicles that also like to freedom camp. So I think if you are having a narrow view of who your freedom campers are in your district, I think it will really inhibit how well the bylaw can work for you, because it really is a spectrum of guests that you're catering to. I mean, I've freedom camped along the West Coast, and I am one of those responsible campers who leaves a place better than I've left it. But I also camp in a low budget vehicle. So, and the choices that we choose would be close to toilets, etc. So those sites of significance aren't being affected. So I think first you really need to look at the spectrum of who your guests are. The West Coast is a beautiful place that a lot of people, both domestically and internationally, come to visit. And this bylaw and the sites that Alicia and the team have chosen really advocate for people safely traveling up your long distance. If people are, say, driving from Greymouth all the way to the QLDC, that's a good 7-hour journey. Depending on when they're leaving, having freedom camping options that are safe and not affecting the areas that you're trying to protect is really important and imperative. But yeah, just looking at the spectrum of users that you will have. Jeff and I recently did an assessment for up on the North Island and the Kapiti Coast, and their spectrum of users we did our assessment over the Waitangi weekend. So really popular weekend in the summer, lots of people out using all of their spaces. And we saw everybody from, domestic Kiwis traveling in a converted bus to $90,000, $200,000 camper vans that were NZMCAers, but choosing to park freedom camping wise, to the spaceships that, I guess we all think of when we think of the backpackers that are using these spaces. So the spectrum is really large, and the types of experiences that they're looking for freedom camping are pretty large. Some people potentially just want a space where they can park safely on a flat piece of ground, and there may be a public toilet available, but they are fully self-contained and are going by the legislation. Or you're looking at guests that maybe want to get away from, say, a town center, and they're looking more beachfront, but they still want to be in a safe, flat location. So yeah, the spectrum of users, I think, is quite important to look at when you're assessing what your bylaw will look like and the sites that you're going to allow or disallow. So I think that's one of the main things I've picked up on so far, and we need to widen our view of what those guests look like. I know historically they've been maybe potentially on the backpacker end, but we have seen across the country that the array of vehicles, especially with this new legislation and how they need to be certified self-contained, is growing. There's also examples too, Wanganui on the North Island. Their district council is really embracing the freedom camping, and they've actually created an entire site that's got 24-hour toilets, and they're allowing camping. So as Alicia had pointed out, it's up to council to decide if they want to allow non-self-contained. But again, if you allow it in an area that's controlled and minimize, we call those managed interventions in the parks world. So if you include managed interventions of where people can go, you can really mitigate any risks or damage.
You could potentially put time limits on a place like that. You might say camping overnight allowed from 7 p.m. till 6 a.m. or something like that.
Yes, so time restrictions are a really great managed intervention that are used nationally. Wellington City actually does it. So they've got 3 freedom camping sites. Big hub, you know, it's the capital. People are going there. There's lots of different experiences people want, but they're using it maybe as a ferry terminal, or they're entering the North Island from the south and they need a place to stay. So they do have 3 designated freedom camping sites, but their time restrictions, they've allowed anywhere, if you can find a street parking space from 7 p.m. until 7 a.m., you can freely park there. You won't get fined. So that's kind of their managed intervention of stopping people from going into the destinations that they don't necessarily want them to, or potentially the carrying capacity of some spaces being pushed because there's too many guests. They've allowed street parking as a time restriction. So from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., people can park freely. And usually it's not, they don't have this homelessness issue in that sense, which is completely separate from this act, but they just have people, you know, they've come off the ferry, they just need to park for the night and then they move on. So time restrictions is a really great managed intervention that you can enforce at all of your sites, or some of them. There's also seasonality of sites too. So you can, you know, open them just for the summer season and then shut them for other seasons.
Samantha, what about, I'm just thinking because we've got a lot of campgrounds in Western District. So that's pretty hard when those people have invested capital into creating a business for themselves. And then 50 metres down the road, you've got people freedom camping. You know, is it possible with the bylaw to have that within 5Ks, nobody can freedom camp within 5Ks of a established campground or something like it?
You potentially could put that in. I would say enforcing that would probably cause more of a headache for council than it would for the people trying to freedom camp. From our experience and from doing site visits across the country, people who are going to freedom camp are going to freedom camp, and you're not really ever targeting those people that want a campground. Now, there has been some really good examples up in Tauranga in the Western Bay of Plenty. So Waihi Beach, I don't know if anybody's been there. It's a really popular, beautiful destination in the summertime and all year round. And they've actually put some freedom camping sites. So the Western Bay of Plenty District Council has put freedom camping sites within, I would say, 200 meters of a campground. And they've got time restrictions on them. So they're really, it's a managed intervention that was really thought through. So people that want to freedom camp, they know that there's a limit of 3 sites. They get there early in those time restrictions. And then more times than less, if they're taken, they go, there's a sign that says there's a campground 200 meters down the way. They're usually just going to go in there and book a night. And they've got the data to prove that. So I wouldn't say that necessarily banning freedom camping within 5 kilometers of campgrounds is necessarily a great managed intervention. You're probably just going to push people out further into areas that you don't want them to camp, rather than designating areas that are appropriate, that won't have any of those risk issues that Alicia had mentioned before, but will also actually benefit your businesses, if that makes.
Yeah, that request came in from several camp owners that have contacted me over this whole situation. They don't support Freedom Camping being anywhere near their businesses, and I fully understand that.
And yeah, I think whatever the intention or fine words you might wish to put around it, by taking the ratepayers' resources and using it to curate campgrounds for people free of charge, what you are doing, in effect, whatever your intentions might be, is providing a product free of charge to a customer base that otherwise, in a regulated environment, you're told you can't camp here, you'll have to go and pay for a night's accommodation just like anybody else, and then they would be directed to that cheaper end of the market where they might be paying as little as $10 or $20 for a campsite, and all of the negative implications of having someone, whether it's sewage or them taking up physical space or whatever else, are internalised and actually paid for by a business owner and passed on to the end user, i.e. the camper.
He's just processing that.
Or I was just, they got muffled, so I've missed a little bit. I heard you're talking basically about your ratepayers paying for the infrastructure basically to support free camping. Is that what you're talking about?
We would pay for, say, a soup kitchen that would understandably cut into the bottom line of some restaurants.
Yeah. So I think the rock and a hard place you sit in is that if you don't have a bylaw that facilitates some agreeance to freedom camping and you work it into your system, they can camp within 200 meters of any access way if they're self-contained, which means they can camp anywhere. So the legislation states that if you are fully self-contained, so you've got your green sticker, which means you've gone through the new licensing system, you've got a fixed toilet with gray water and black water. If there is no bylaw in place directing where you can camp, you can legally camp within 200 meters of any access way, roadway, coastal or riverway, or waterway, sorry. They can camp anywhere. So I think the difficulty you're going to have to find is finding that happy balance. You are a tourist destination, which is a hot spot. So I think maybe finding other ways where infrastructure can be paid for by the tourists, that's another conversation. But there is ways that you can use freedom camping to your benefit where it's not causing any public safety risk. And that's also to the residents, but also to the other visitors. Any access issues, so any difficulty to accessing those spaces, as well as any significance areas, so ecological, cultural, heritage, etc. So and that's how you get around mitigating those areas that if they tick any of those boxes, then they're probably not suited for freedom camping and you can prohibit. But there are lots of spaces, as Alicia and Kate have pointed out, that do have properties that can safely accommodate for freedom camping with hopefully little impact to the resident.
The legislation
could be
owned land, doesn't it?
It applies to council owned, yeah, and you can also include NZTA or DOC land as well. We haven't chosen to do
Yeah. So when Sam's saying anywhere, that's not strictly true. It's not
anywhere on council owned land.
Yeah, so it's not steam over a little bit.
But what she's saying is they could park downstairs outside our office if they wanted to.
Yes.
Which is correct.
Yes.
Yeah. And you can't stop that if you don't have a bylaw.
Just getting back to what I said about our proposed bylaw, if you take the Hokitika map as an example, it's got a designated exclusion zone in red. How do you see that complies with the spirit of the legislation, excluding that area? The grounds that we can exclude freedom camping in those areas. Do you think it's valid, what we've done there?
There's been other councils around New Zealand that have done that. So the Mackenzie region is one that has done exclusion areas, just like Alicia and the team have outlined. And yes, that totally works. It's if there's it's all based on the evidence though. So again, for being challenged once this bylaw goes out for public consultation, you have to be mindful of what the community and or other groups that have interest, other stakeholders will have against those exclusion areas. So if they don't tick the boxes necessarily of all of those checkpoints within the local government New Zealand has outlined, you know, your check system, then you may get challenged on them. So it's really the balance between those. Yeah.
Could I give an example around exclusion areas? Western Bay used to do exclusion areas and they don't now because they didn't really work. And I would venture that's probably Queenstown's experience as well. Where Western Bay have done very well is why have an exclusion area? Why not just have the only 3 spaces you can park in? So what they've done at Waihi Beach, which was a real problem for them, is to say, well, instead of excluding the whole coastline, we're going to say there's 3 times 3 places where you can park, and they fill up real fast. And then what happens after that? They get displaced. So in fact, what Western Bay have done is we call it managed scarcity. You want the people to come to your district, and as Sam was saying, mostly now they're the right people, because the wrong people are simply illegal now, and that's the key difference. So what Western Bay have done is they've been very clever with less sites in really nice places where freedom campers would go. And what we're seeing, as Sam's saying, with the domestic people in the main, is they're getting there really early, they're filling those spaces, and then people move on to somewhere else. But what we're finding in Western Bay is it's mostly a place where they can go as well, or a motor camp. So what's working with the law change is the experiences we've seen in the past are really limited for those people who are setting out to break the law. And if they break the law, that's it. That's why you need a bylaw. And that's why you need an assessment to back that up. For Hokitika CBD, where I did do some work with council once, the exclusion zone is a bit problematic. Why don't you just say there's only 3 spaces you can park in, and they're this special place at the waterfront to the south, and then another place to the north. Once that's full, that's full. And then those councils that are doing a very good job of it are saying to another partner, why does it have to be council's issue to deal with this? So that's where NZMCA is creating a site, or as we saw with Queenstown, Ngāi Tahu were looking to set up sites. And actually it's where you work with the motor camps and say, how do we sort of make folks who are caught out come to you? So there's some really big successes around the country with that, and there's a bit of myth busting around what's happening, but you need a bylaw.
So you've got some businesses that have got council provided toilets there, so I think that's why I said it was the Treetop and the Salmon Farm.
Treetop's gone.
Yeah. Okay. But with the Salmon Farm at Ringa, so we've provided them, and then the businesses manage them. So that would be an example of that.
It's a good example.
Do we pay for the cleaning of the toilets in those sites?
Yes.
For that one, I think that worked really well at Western when we set the system up, was working in partnership with businesses. And so we had Honey Cafe, and when we were funded, we had toilets and bins in there. The Treetops worked really well. We worked in with Candidate Rankers, and I can't remember the other app, so when we were putting things on there, would say this site's provided for free by the business, please patronise the business, please go and buy a pie, have breakfast, do the attraction, whatever, and it worked really well. When the funding stopped in COVID, I went to see Bonnie and Doug at Treetops and said, look, we'll pull the toilets out. And they said, no, we'll take over management paying for the servicing them, because it was dragging in so much business. It stayed, and it's only recently been pulled out.
And why was it pulled out?
Because the funding stopped.
No, just recently.
I'm not sure, different owners, I think. The Paringa Salmon Farm Cafe, that was, I think the landowners had already put toilets in there, and we replaced them. They were on road reserve. That was TIF funded stuff, and they were getting 30 campers there a night, and there was business opportunities at the height before pre-COVID, and the owner was going to put in salmon fishing ponds and kayak and all sorts of things, but then COVID happened and all.
There is still some quite good business opportunities
Potential,
around that, yeah.
Seven Farm certainly has had, a lot of campers parking there.
Sorry?
The Seven Farm, he still gets a lot of people camping there, huge amount.
What's the average cost of a campground for a, from the sand, getting up the coast?
The fee, on average, like a night stay at a campground?
Yeah.
Yeah, so on average in the high season for an unpowered site is probably between 10 and 20 bucks per person.
Yeah.
If you'd like a powered site, it's usually 40-ish, 40 to 60-ish, depending on where it is.
Yeah.
I know, for example, that gentleman mentioned Kiwi Camp. So they offered powered sites for $10. And they've trialed some areas on the east coast of the South Island with a council partnership where basically you register. So there's a reserve, a space where they allow parking. And the reservation is free. So there's just bullards. And it's just a free area where they can park. But obviously the council, from the Kiwi Camp app, they get all of the data of who's visiting. So they know where they're coming from, how long they've stayed, are they domestic, are they international, etc. And then if they would like to, and it's just a paddock basically with some fences around it. And then if they would like to plug in, the council they funded, say, 2 plug-in areas. And then it's a pay per night to plug in. And from me speaking with Gene Simmons at Kiwi Camp a fair few times, they've, on average in the summer, in the months, they would say they had, 5 people plug in per night. So they were making a kickback with a minimal site. They had to be fully self-contained because there weren't any other facilities other than a plug to plug their van in. So that was a way that they could, get money back from their tourists. But also, too, if you wanted to just camp there for free, you could just register, and then they got all of that data. And I think there was time restrictions on those sites, as well as a number of nights per month kind of thing. So 2 consecutive nights, 10 in the 30 days. So it was just a type of managed intervention that they tried out, and it worked out really well. Again, it was a larger, the council was quite rural, so didn't have a lot of resources for enforcement. So this was just something that they tested out. So it wasn't a full, Kiwi Camp facility. It wasn't, $1 million fit out. It was very simple interventions to see how it worked. And it was a really positive intervention that they could use.
And Sam, the other, look, do you know what the cost of like the average camper van would be?
To hire?
Yes.
Yeah, so they're not cheap anymore. They're about the same price as an average stay of accommodation. So I would say on average it's about $120 for, say, a Juicy van. That's per day. If you're looking at the Mauis, so the ones that will now be all self-contained, you're looking at, say, you're going 2 weeks, that's a $10,000 rental.
And whereabouts are those companies?
Pardon?
Where's the place?
Yeah, sorry, whereabouts are those companies mainly?
So I would say they're all based out of main airports areas. So I would say the QLDC, Christchurch, Wellington, Auckland, Tauranga, any major space that's got an airport, they'll have a hub. And I guess the appeal too, especially with this whole movement of freedom camping, is that New Zealand is beautiful. Small country, but lots of great things to see on 2 islands. And instead of having to rent a vehicle as well as accommodation nights, people then prefer to be able to drive where they want to go and have that freedom of movement. The South Island loop that everybody does, the North Island, they do a loop, or up the Coromandel, or up to far north. So there is an appeal to the freedom camping, not just because of the free accommodation, but it's that freedom of movement. It gives people the opportunity to spend that money, like we've been saying, on experiences, taking that Franz Josef flight up to the glacier, doing some, deep sea fishing, going into the glowworm caves. It gives them that opportunity to sink that money into that side of the tourism sector rather than the accommodation side.
Thanks, I'm just getting clarity on where all the money's going. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Tanka, I just looked up the DOC website at Mahanapua, and just for your interest, adults $15 a night,
Yeah.
children $7.50 a night.
Yeah, that on.
That's a great camp too.
And it's 45 for family.
We have a Kiwi camp here on Fitzgerald Street. It is hardly used.
True.
Why is that?
Good
Because
question.
we went in there the other night when we were on,
Beautiful
the
facility.
facilities are amazing. Laundromat,
Yeah,
showers,
you're right, yeah.
cooking facilities, everything. And it's actually been, granted they possibly
That's
opened
right.
just pre-COVID, so obviously it was bad timing.
Hmm.
But even last year and the year before, Scott and I both said, why is that not getting filled up?
Yeah, I also think as well, there's a couple of roles.
Because it's awesome facilities.
There's a couple of roles that we've got as local government, and it's not for us to decide that visitors should be buying ice creams instead of bottles of Coke, or helicopter flights instead of rafting trips, or say activities versus accommodation. That's not really our job. Our job is to regulate the impacts of visitors in a way that's agreeable to the local population as a whole. Now, we could just have a free-for-all, which would be kind of cool and kind of loose, to be honest, if you just let anyone camp wherever they wanted. Would be kind of neat, and just go full Wild West, or we could go really restrictive or really over-regulated, or pick some sort of sweet spot in between. But this sort of vague tenor that it's preferable for visitors to be spending at business X rather than business Y isn't really our business, to be honest. It's just our role as regulators to actually regulate the impacts of the visitors while they're here, not decide whether they should be spending on accommodation or activities. That's beyond our remit.
So we shouldn't be putting in exclusion zones around the camping grounds, is that
What we should be doing, there's externalities that arise from having visitors doing whatever they want. At the extreme end, there's defecation in the bushes, overly full rubbish bins, or even at the lighter end, it's just the unpleasantness of seeing people drying their laundry on the dashboard of their car while there's a row of camper vans parked out on, Rebel Street or something like that. That's the more superficial end of it. But how sensitive we want to be to those sorts of impacts is the choice that we've kind of got to make. And then if we want to contain them or manage them, it's how heavy a hand, I guess, we take in doing that, relevant to all the other benefits that we perceive, or really do get from visitors. So, yeah, but it's not this whole thing about they should be spending money on this rather than that, or it's not really our job. Yeah.
So we don't take the camping grounds views into account. I know you're arguing that to support what you were saying before.
No.
He's quite correct with what he's saying. It's not our job to tell people where they spend their money.
No, the loss of income for, say, camping ground owners or anything like that, that's a consideration we can take into account, but it's just more, what are the impacts of having too many visitors in too many places and too diffusely managed versus trying to actually contain those impacts, basically, so that you're not just putting the bill on the ratepayer to just curtail all of this amenity for what benefit, really.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone's trying to say that they should be spending their money there as opposed to there. What I think is being said is that if they don't spend their money there, they do still spend their money there. Not saying whether it's good, bad or indifferent, that's just what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think they're trying to say, actually, if you're going to go freedom camping, you need to go and spend your money on the helicopter. Who cares?
Yeah, a quick example, if you look at some councils that are doing really well, they've done really well by staying out of that very discussion around, some are really laying claim to it though. Some are saying we want lots of motorhomes and the people we want coming to our district, but we're not going to enter the business of providing things for them. We just really want them to welcome them with open arms. But what they're doing is everything's a trial. A council like Hauraki has led this without paying for anything. So they've done things like a sports club's come forward, the rugby club at Waitakaruru, and they've said, we'll deal with it. So they offer, per the bylaw, some sites where they can go, they can plug in, they can use the rooms, but they pay for that. And that's in a situation where there's no campground. Where there is a campground, some of the campgrounds are getting really clever about actually trying to get that business into them. And that's where the council is getting involved with business so that they can have the best of both worlds. And I can share a lot of things with Alicia around how they actually do that without entering the business, but actually it's their intervention to stop people parking outside But it is enforced. That's the other side of it. So that they've set out to have the best of both worlds. Hauraki, for example, very quickly, they've decided that money is theirs. So what they've done with some road reserves is set up powered sites. And what they do is say it's a trial. It's been a trial for about 8 years now, but they're making money off that. NZMCA has paid for all of the powered sites, I think, and the sewage collection. That's all money that hasn't been the ratepayer. But what it means is they've got like a limit, so they can only park there for a certain amount of time, and that rules out people who are trying to, take the mickey. And there's a long list of things we can share with the staff around having the best of both worlds. You have the bylaw, which you have to have, but these managed interventions that Sam's referred to is really that sweet spot that one of the elected members mentioned. That's pretty much where you want to be, because why should council do all the work? And that's where some councils have done really well with offsetting the impact to others who want to help. Or it belongs to DOC, or it belongs to some Crown land where the revenue needs to come back to council.
Jeff, you mentioned early the managed scarcity piece. Can the district not be part of the managed scarcity piece, whereby our district as a whole allows for freedom camping in X, Y, and Z position, not the entire district?
It's a great question, because it's a personal view, but I think that's where you need to be. I think you'll find that the ones that are doing really well are saying quite openly, look, we want to be a freedom camping friendly town. So Hanma have done that. But they're at one end of that continuum. But Western Bay have had real problems, because at Thames Coromandel, their neighbour, it's a simple ban and you get fined, and there's going to be a reckoning about that. But all that really happens is that these folks are really highly communicative online. They go through the app, or NZMCA have a really good website, and that is all about the chatter. What else do you do while you're on a motorhome all day? If you've got a passenger online, and they end up going to Western Bay instead. And what Western Bay have had to deal with is, okay, so we've got this huge pressure at certain times, normally long weekends when people aren't around. What are some of the things we can do? And they've managed to offset 2 or 3 of those things at once. The managed scarcity is where you go to the most popular beach, the best car park, the best park, and it's been thrashed in the past. Now, the first 6 spaces fill up straight away, and those people enforce the newcomers. So what happens in practice, and I've done the assessments and the monitoring, is where the 7th van turns up, and the first 6 don't want to get the enforcement. So they go over and sort of do what humans do and say, hi, where are you from? Oh, we're from Norway. And they go, oh, okay, what are your plans for tonight? Oh, well, we just thought we'd park here. Sorry, this place is full. And that plays out in Tauranga City as well. And Gisborne is another one who's, I think, cracked that with freedom camping next to campgrounds. And that's where it sorts itself out. The self-regulation is a hugely underestimated part of it. Sorry, that's a long answer, but I'm full of examples.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I guess we'd be relying quite heavily on the itself sorting its problem out, and other tourists telling other people to go on, because with the government funding going away from the enforcement side of things, the bylaw is great, and to say you can stay here if you're the first 4 vehicles here versus the 5th to 500th vehicle that turns up to stay there for a night. If we're not enforcing that actively, it doesn't matter. The people you talk about communicating freely will continue to do that, and they'll go and stay in these places. If there's no enforcement, that's going to get out in 5 minutes. That Westland doesn't have that in place. If we don't have it in place, and bylaw or not, we have a problem that we're dealing with, which is no different to the one we're dealing with last night, and probably will deal with tonight.
Yeah, well, very quickly, and I'm astounded by this personally, is around the country, and Kapiti Coast had a really big issue with their waterfront as well. The new self-containment rules really seem to be working. I'm staggered that I thought there'd be more regulation and more punitive enforcement required. And I would boldly say we're just not seeing as much of that. But you do need a bylaw, and that's the stick part of it, is that you'll always get a percentage that are going to wind up your community. We're seeing less of them, there's no doubt about that. but I think you do need something that you can call upon if you need to. In the case of some of these councils, though, you're finding that a mixture of things is resolving the need to have to come in and be there every night. And again, in the case of Kapiti Coast and Western Bay, it's a small group of people that are being a real pain in the butt, and they have to be dealt with. Typically, once the word gets out, though, online that you are enforcing something, the problem does go away. And that's in the case of, you mentioned, let's look at Westland. A similar coastline would be East Coast, North Island, and they've had some nightmares with occupations and all sorts of things. But once the word gets out that this is not a soft place to go, it does tend to resolve itself. And Queenstown have done that. They've come out and said, effectively, we don't want anybody coming, and that's worked. They all go to Central Otago District instead, and that place is hemorrhaging with people that you want. $350,000 motorhomes. Mackenzie's the same. All the money actually goes to the regional council because they've set up a dedicated site on the regional park in Tekapo. It's the country's most popular motor caravan location, and the park gets the money directly. So they're making money from something they didn't even pay for. It's a revenue gathering thing, and there's some really weird examples out there that are working, but Tekapo isn't having the sort of regulation interventions they've had in the past. They still need someone to pop down to the waterfront now and again in a day glow and go, "Hi, who are you?" But the agencies between them have worked that out.
Jeff, can you explain a bit further? You just mentioned that some people are making money from these things. The concept of freedom or free camping and making money seems a bit of a juxtaposition. How does that work for them?
Let's quickly look at Tekapo with the regional park. So it really annoyed Mackenzie District when ECAN, who have a park there, allowed this to happen. But what happens is that it's part of the great trip. If you're going to, say, the West Coast from Christchurch on a long route through Haast, they're all coming back out that way, the place is nearly full most of the time because you're welcome. So when you go there, it's got a fenced dog park next door. So a lot of these folks can't stay in hotels or Airbnbs or even campgrounds because they've got a couple of dogs. Dogs they've been left with when the kids are left home, so they've got a motorhome. Where do they go? If they want a break from campgrounds, this really good space at Tekapo Regional Park. It's cheap, but the price is going up. It's a fenced area. You go in, there's barrier arm. Now there's sort of almost a Kiwi Cash style of going in there. You don't need to meet anybody. But that amount of money is building. And the other thing with some of these locations is regenerative tourism, which is where you want to be if you've got a tourism person at the table. And places like Eastwood Hill Arboretum in Gisborne or Tekapo, having these people stay 2 or 3 nights because the dog is welcome, they are welcome. There's not far to the town where they are, or there is, and they're volunteering as well. So they're spending an extra day planting plants or pulling weeds with some new friends they've made in neighbouring vans. The dog's welcome, so they can walk the dog every morning. It can have a run area where they go. And those same people at Eastwood Hill are now being asked to donate money to the park, as well as volunteer and leave something in their will. And that's a real US model. It's worth something. People are prepared to pay for a little bit of service. For Tekapo, it feels like freedom camping. It feels like you don't have to meet the council. You don't have to meet anybody. You can just park, pay the money, stay there a few nights. Weirdly, the public toilet is quite close to Tekapo. But we're seeing that the quality of vehicle coming in, because they're welcome, it's on the jungle drums. People go, this is a place you should go. And the park is the first in show, of course, is McLaren Falls Park in Tauranga. They're now making 6 figures from that because they've set out to change the park to accommodate freedom campers. And they've got the people they want. They're not having the parties at night. They're not having the rubbish, but they're making proper money out of it. And Hauraki are now looking for parks in places like that. Thames Coromandel, it's not necessarily freedom camping, but they're making about $300,000 a year from parking because you can't go anywhere, so you may as well go to a place you're allowed to go. But that's a bad example because it's not freedom camping in itself. But that's where some places are moving towards and TCDC are looking at the same thing in Mercury Bay.
Sorry,
long answer. Yeah.
Well, I'm talking about freedom camping to possibly investing in the campground business. And I think those are two quite different things, because what you're describing is campgrounds that are owned and operated by council as basically a council-owned business. And if we were going to, and you sort of talked about these desirable beachfront locations for people to park their wagons and other ones that get filled up. Well, that to me just sounds like supply and demand operating, but without any actual pricing mechanism there to sort of ration out what's in high demand. And if we were going to take that to its logical conclusion, the best thing to do might be to actually just tender that land out to a private operator to run as a campground for a season or for a season-to-season, back-to-back basis, if that's what we wanted to do. But generally speaking, it wouldn't surprise me that councils own some desirable land that people would like to park their vehicles there, and is that the best place to have them, or should we leave that domain open and free for the public to enjoy unencumbered by people parking their vehicles?
Western Bay have done that. So they've found some land which cost them some money, and NZMCA have taken on the lease for that land and they run the whole thing. But to your point, I think if there's a market failure, that's the bit where council gets caught in the middle. If the campgrounds, and again, there's some councils where the campgrounds have stepped forward and picked up that demand with some sort of coordinated marketing, and that's where the 3 sites on the waterfront come in. So you want people to be welcome, but they can't go places. They end up where you want them. Most people are law abiding. They just want to know where to go. And that's the value of a really good evidence-based assessment. What you think is elected members, the thresholds being decided, and then that supports a bylaw, and that's the sort of 3 legs of the stool.
So under the Freedom Camping Act, if we have designated freedom camping zones, are they allowed to be charged for, or do they have to just be for all and sundry within a limited number of spaces?
That's up to you.
Well, you can decide. Yeah.
You can decide. So, but back to, so I don't know which councillor said about the making money off of freedom camping. That seems kind of backwards. So the example I gave earlier was for Hurunui District Council.
Backwards?
Pardon?
What was backwards, sorry?
Making money off of freedom camping. Freedom and money don't they don't equate.
That was me, and I said juxtaposition, but yeah,
juxtaposition. Yes, sorry, apologies. No, but I'm just giving you the example of that. So I had mentioned earlier that on the east coast of the South Island, there was a council that used the Kiwi Camp framework to do that. So it was Hurunui District Council. They have a domain, so a public reserve that is owned by council. They put up barricades, i.e. a managed intervention, so a bullard, that you sign into the app. It's free. The door to the freedom camping area is free, which means freedom camping is free. But if they wanted to plug in, then there's the option that they can pay $5 or $10 a night to get 24 hours of power. So you're within your bylaw, you are providing a space that you have deemed through the assessment tool that it is, safe for the public, both residents and visitors. There's no access issues and there's no significance areas. So it's deemed through all of your assessment that it's safe, that you can have, you can allow freedom camping. Then you put in some managed intervention, which are these bullards. You've got a system in place that you're collecting data of who your visitors are, but then there is the potential where you can make money off of it. They are camping for free, but if they'd like to plug in, then it's a cost. So again, it's kind of that halfway mark between you're going into the camping business. You've deemed it a freedom camping site, but you're kind of just tacking on a little bit extra going, okay, well, you can camp for free. This space has time restrictions. That space has a limited amount of sites. So, you're only allowed 10 vehicles in there, which it can only fit 10 vehicles in spots. But you also have the option where you can get a kickback from them if they'd like to plug in. Or there's other options. I mean, there's lots of options that you could do, but that's just what Hurunui District Council did.
Would you grant that they're not camping for free so much as camping free of charge at somebody else's expense?
How is well, they're on public land.
Yeah, and we hold that land on behalf of the public and then manage it at the public expense.
But they could, for example, go there for the day and use it all day long, which then they're using public land, which is taxpayer dollars. You know, you've cut the grass, you've done all of your amenity gardening for them, you've trimmed the trees, and they're still using it, but then they leave.
I think we need to come back to West Coast.
Yes.
I think there's a really big balance too between, yes, providing excessive amenities to freedom campers, but also as a public space. The public isn't residents. The public is the public. If you've traveled anywhere else in New Zealand and enjoyed, you've gone down to Invercargill and joined Queen's Park, or you've come up to the QLDC and you've enjoyed our beautiful lakes and our parks here, our backcountry, etc. There's other taxpayers that are paying for those too. And it's public spaces and you are a visitor. I think the fine line is that you're saying that there's an extra amenity where the taxpayers are paying for extra amenity for free. And I think that's a really big gray area that you need to watch out for, because you are providing public spaces for the public, which is not just visitors. It's not just residents, sorry, it's visitors and residents.
Good idea, Donna, pulling it back in line. So if the rubber hits the road on this, we've currently got a bylaw from 2018 that's in place that restricts the entire district based off public health and preserving access. That obviously doesn't fly with the current legislation and direction government are taking it. At what point are we going to have a bylaw that passes the legal test if we say you can freedom camp in this part of our coast, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places where the community support it, like it, see value from it, can find a value add, as you suggest, they can find value adds and the freedom camping may be able to make the money. And this will stand up to legal challenge if it's an NZMCA or someone else to take us to task on this. Where is the absolute, dare I say it, minimum that will be in line with legislation and legal challenge?
Well, the absolute minimum is that you could use the model bylaw, as Alicia's saying. You've got an assessment. The main thing is you've got an evidence base, as Sam was saying. So let's look at someone who got themselves into a lot of hot water, but doubled down and that hot water got boiling. Queenstown. So they really rubbed, personal view, but I think they really sort of thought, well, we just don't want this to happen. So we're going to double down, and we're going to do an assessment that actually conveys to people what we think. And it was ruled by the High Court to have a lot of irrelevancies in it. And I think that's where things have moved on in terms of the level of compliance that you need to have with your process is probably best to sort of take that model bylaw, take your assessment, decide if your assessment is thorough enough, and look at the examples put forward. And it should be a pretty streamlined process to do, because every bylaw is never perfect. There'll always be 1 or 2 sites that in the course of the bylaw's life you might want to change, and you can change it. You don't have to wait 5 years. You could bring forward a review and say, wow, we got it wrong with friends, things have changed, it's busier now, or there's some new things that we weren't aware of. You can just change it, but the main thing is to have that in place. I think if you don't do it, the thing is it's legal to park anywhere you want, which is a bit of a push from that government legislation. There may not be that much work ahead of you in terms of cost, but you do need that assessment to be very clear that you've done the work and you've got an evidence trail. Again, very quickly, what we're seeing is a less of an adversarial approach with the bylaw consultation process that we have done just around the country. And I would suggest that what you could do is even reach out to some of the usual suspects. You could actually engage with NZMCA and say, look, here's what we're thinking. And they've been involved with a number of councils where I've been working with the council, and they've said, look, this is really good. Would you like a letter of support from us? And that's happened with Gisborne and one of their bylaws round. They actually decided to sort of bring some people closer than others. And then they were in a position to jointly say, look, these residents are super upset because they've got evidence that this won't work as a site. And that's where Queenstown fell down, in my personal view, is that they could have just actually had a bylaw that banned those sites. They could have just done that, but their blanket approach with irrelevancies caught them out. I think you'd be fine with a lot of the work you've already done. It's just really getting it to the point where you as elected members can decide on it, following the feedback from the public.
And
Okay. You go, Sam.
sorry, Ashley, I was just going to add to that. So with this evidence that we keep
Can we
talking
stop this now, please? We've spoken enough about this.
Yeah, we need to move on with our presentation, so.
We'll move on to the next page, please.
Sorry, we've got a lot to get through with this, and we're really only just purely turning things over now on repetitive conversation. But we've got a lot to cover off with this still. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam and Jeff, for joining us. We'll now move on to our next piece of the workshop, which is our site assessments.
Could you please ask why the change from the previous bylaw? Why did some of the sites change? Why not just stick with what we had?
The legislation's changed, hasn't it?
Yeah, the legislation's changed and some things are inappropriate now.
We don't have the option of just sticking with the status quo, is that right?
That's true. Yeah, that's correct. Okay, so as we've talked about, there were site assessments done, and I wanted to give you a bit more background on how we did the site assessments. So, as we've already said, we have to assess our council land. So we undertook a desktop assessment of all council-owned reserves, town halls, public toilet sites, as well as previously known freedom camping sites. And then we created a shortlist. And then that shortlist, one of our council staff members went out and completed a field assessment of each of the shortlisted sites, using those criteria that I previously highlighted in the Act. So protecting the area, looking at the access and the ecological cultural significance as well. And back to this 5K radius debacle, we have created some maps, and I can hand those out if you want, just around, if you put 5 kilometres around every private campsite in the district, what that would look like. But basically that is not feasible as well. So what I'd like to do next is for you guys to think about some key considerations as we go through each of the sites that are listed in the proposed bylaw. So the first question is there an adequate distribution of sites across the district? Because that's really important for getting a bylaw through. The second one is, are there facilities at the sites? So toilets, rubbish bins, that sort of thing. The third one is whether the car park is like a formed car park area, so obviously that will have less ecological impact because they'll be driving on asphalt. The other one is just around the size of the site, and the fourth one is, and that came on the council meeting as well, was just around the cultural significance. So if there's higher cultural significance, that can warrant a total ban, but I'm not an expert in that, so we'll probably leave that up to you guys as well. So now what I think we'll do is we can go through each site, and we can debate the merits of whether you want those sites included or not, but bearing in mind you have to choose some sites across the district.
A question on one site, which was always popular, probably well before maybe, or definitely well before Alicia's day here. The one at the Serpent, you came down the Serpentine Hill.
Aiken
Creek.
Aiken Creek?
Might be.
Yeah, the one's got the concrete bollards.
Yeah. Well, I hate the concrete bollards. I think they look bloody awful.
They do.
And I remember travelling to Christchurch or Greymouth and thinking, oh, look at all those, all those campers, I always thought it was a good sign of.
It's an NZTA site.
So we went there to use it anymore.
And Bruce and I stopped in there about 3 different times, morning and night, and the second year we put a portaloo in there.
Yeah.
And there was still just as much defecation up the other end of the place. It was absolutely
I know
disgusting.
sometimes it was heaving.
The problem too was rubbish. There was huge rubbish.
They were just scared of the bushes.
And people became to resent them and were going past all through the night,
So was
honking
the
horns
thing
and
quite
having
popular?
I seen about 50 people on here going right up about that. I was in the council meeting.
No, but there's also, there's an unfortunate reality that if you allow people to camp in a township or a built-up residential area, people don't want them next door to their houses. No. So if you don't allow them there, the other end of the extreme, and there's issues all the way between, the other end of it is push them out towards Lake Canary or something like that, and you've got them desecrating a nice, serene, pristine area and that sort of stuff, right? And so neither end of that spectrum is desirable, and there's undesirable aspects all the way in between as well, whereas if you can contain them into some camping grounds where they're actually paying for what they're getting, and the rubbish and the toilets and all of that sort of cost can be borne by the people who are benefiting from it, then I think you can actually contain the situation far more effectively.
The pain takes it away from the free.
You've got to pay everywhere else in the world except for here, so, you know,
Yeah.
we've just got that
Yeah, I'm
reputation.
sort of,
Alicia, with that there, I mean, Kamara structured themselves to be the Freedom Camping site, because it's on council when that work was done, and they've got the toilets there, we've got
And I've got a sign that says
everything
toilet
else.
for the night and
But the one there by the Arahura Heritage Bridge site, to me, that should be self-contained vehicles only,
There's no facility.
because there are no facilities. When you go through that list of what we've got in here, we've got a lot of facilities that are actually fully catered with rubbish and toilets. And I think we just need, if we stick with those, and then the other ones, it's crystal clear, you must be self-contained where there's no facilities provided.
I'm pretty
That's
sure
good.
in the bylaw, that's what we've done, that site is.
Yeah, when you go into the bigger table further down, it's not stipulated, it's actually, allowed, that it's got both allocation.
So,
Yeah.
forgive me, I know there'll be consultation on this, but having all of the potential impacts that can come about from freedom camping right next to probably one of the most culturally significant rivers on the whole west coast, is that something that any thought's been given to or not?
That's one iwi I think would need to be.
Same with the Milltown site, Patrick.
Yeah.
There's only suggestions.
No, I was just asking if
That's
any
right,
consideration had
Who owns
been
that?
given.
Same with iwi, yeah, you're
Who
right.
owns that land?
NZTA, don't they? Didn't they give it to?
No, it's council.
But it's probably where it's based.
Yeah, I'm just thinking
Across
to
the river from the Moray.
otherwise unknowing visitors who may not be aware of the significance of that
It's a really nice
river.
spot.
And it is, but, you know,
But if you had to be self-contained to be there, but you're not gonna, you know, everybody's not gonna comply with that.
And
but-
the other thing is like the one on, Wells Street that you've suggested, near the public toilets. Then what hours are the public toilets? They're not open 24 hours, are they?
Should we just suggest maybe we just go through each one and then we can comment on each one and then we can keep track which ones we want in and which ones we want out.
You tell her, Kate. Alicia, you said before we have to allow some. Can you put a metric on what some is?
No, there's no minimum standard, there's no maximum, but we have to, yeah, like you said, the rules are looking at land, assessing it for the cultural, ecological, safe access, health and safety, all of that stuff. So,
Okay.
and even distribution. You can't say one in Kamara and no more.
We can't say what, sorry?
One in Kamara and no more.
No.
I don't have an answer, there's no reason.
The Kamara's got the community behind it, so,
Yes,
and they've got everything there, they've structured it to meet the need. Arahura, so,
Well, I think that makes the cultural box of being scrapped.
Yeah, so with the assessment, just to make,
What about consultation?
just to make,
yeah.
just to make
We
clear,
can't make that decision.
Sorry, Kate's talking.
just to make clear with the assessment, it's like accumulative, so like, it's like a score from 1 to 5. So if all of them were 5, 10 would be total banned, we wouldn't have included in the assessment. So even if it's like 5 in the cultural one, but then 1 and the other ones, it's quite hard to deem it down to like the score. So I think if we did deem one as culturally like too high of an impact, we just have to get it like assessed externally. Because technically it would have met the score in other areas, which leaves us at risk of saying, well, we're deeming it as culturally like too high of an impact, but the rest of it's really low.
You can
So,
see
yeah.
the scoring assessment, it's in your agenda.
Yeah, it's all
So
there.
it's kind of going to be higher than all of them,
So
and
Arahura
then
was
to total a ban.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we just get it assessed.
It was a total ban.
No, it wasn't.
No.
It wasn't. The other ones were really low in scores,
Yeah.
so that's why I allowed it.
And I think we should be asking, iwi, asking Francois if that's regarded as being
It's a great spot.
inappropriate.
Yeah.
And also it would need to be absolutely self-contained.
Yes, self-contained only.
And who's going to enforce?
Okay, so we're going to go through the list, Kate?
Yeah, okay, so we're happy with Kamara, we're gonna check, someone is gonna check, or I can check with Ahura.
Yeah.
Okay, then we've got the 3 sites, in Sunset Point, in Hokitika, the beachfront, K Square, Sunset Point.
Okay, so Gibson Key, Western Car Park. Okay, so that was a no.
I think for these ones, for me, it's that where you put the time limits on, so it's not affecting the local.
Yeah, so if you look at the end schedule in the bylaw, it has the time limits, it has the number of parking spaces, and it has whether they're certified self-contained or not.
And you've
So
got the hours
everything's
in the notes, you've got the notes, you've got the hours there anyway. It is in the notes.
That one at Cass Square doesn't work for me, I think. If I lived across the road, I don't want to hear car doors slamming on them.
Everything's going to be sacred land to somebody. It does not matter where you put it.
Yeah, I know,
There's no
but
problems
it's,
here.
it's, you know.
Yeah, and the Cass Square toilets, I know for a fact, they don't open in the morning when I.
Which one?
This stuff is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Put it there, people go and use it. Simple as that.
Plus, as Don has pointed out, it's toilets are closed at night.
They don't have to be. We've got the bylaw in there, you could change them and have them 24
That'd be good.
No, I'd like to remove Cass Square.
I don't.
Yes, I do.
Just beachfront and Sunset Point.
Yeah.
Okay, so remove Cass Square?
Alright, so we're happy with the beachfront and Sunset Point?
Yeah.
Surely these orders go out for consultation, don't they?
Yes, they do.
Yes.
But we still need to.
We have to decide what goes out for consultation.
Yes.
That's what we're
Just
trying
a
to do.
suggestion about Hokitika and General, the exclusion zone.
Yeah.
I've had some feedback about the south side, particularly the beach access.
You're going to come to that.
That's next.
We all went, okay.
So just one question, so someone rang me up last night, who probably rang everyone. Can papers be added in
Yeah, absolutely.
and then be taken out?
Yeah, so we'll have.
During the consultation, so
Yeah.
we're not restricted at all?
No, so it will go out for consultation. Everyone will have a month to provide feedback. Then there'll be a hearing. And in the hearing, you can have additional deliberation, just like we are today, and decide what's in, what's out. Then it will go back to council, and then you can choose to accept the bylaw or not.
Okay, so with the locations of Hokitika Beachfront and Sunset Point, we definitely need to check the toilets opening and shutting hours, because I've had feedback in the last, yesterday it was, about the Hokitika Beachfront toilets, how they have the times, and they're definitely not sticking with those times. And there's
Yeah,
been.
that's a separate maintenance issue.
Yeah, and I'm just saying, like, if we are going to suggest public toilets, you know, obviously beside where they're camping, you know, we do need to have them.
Question just on the toilets, being that we're putting these sites predominantly by toilets, are they going to incur then more cleaning?
Yes.
They will, which is another cost to the ratepayer.
Yes.
Significant.
Yeah.
This is the thing, if we
Would you
can,
rather pay the extra fee as opposed to leaving them dumping in the bush?
Oh, I know, though it's actually abhorrent, and we
No, I
get
just
to the
think-
South for a World Heritage Area, and in the past, it's been rubber stamped as being okay, and it's not. So, it's just something we've got to be aware of, there will be repercussions.
You could also make certain areas, you know, self-contained only, or. you know,
Yes.
So that they
Yep.
don't, so they shouldn't be there without toilets. So
Yeah.
there's different things.
And as well,
Which is what
obviously
we did for
Sunset
Hera.
Point. Yeah.
Milltown.
Pretty cool location.
Same cultural check required for the one down the bottom as well.
Milltown.
It's still on the banks of the Arahu River, and I don't know that that's going to fly with the cultural check, but we need to check with Mana Whenua.
Yeah, that's fine. What's Dr. Man, that's really big.
What's
That's on private land anyway. That's on private land.
Russell Copeland actually supports that being a freedom camping area and was disappointed that it was excluded.
why have we got private land ones up there?
Because you've related the use of that.
Oh, okay, so we're, yeah.
Look, do it like a Hera, just check and see if there's any risk, if there's not, it stays in. What was the other one next to that? It was, Woodstock. That works well, yeah.
Ross Hall?
I can tell you, I spoke with Charlie McBeath this morning, and the Community Society is very strongly opposed to that, and they'll be
Yep.
putting that in these submissions, so.
Yep.
And likewise with Brian and the Harry community for their one, at what point does, to the point Patrick's raised multiple times today, the no free lunch piece and the fact that the Harry community and the ratepayers of the district are funding freedom camping at that space, they're not for it at all.
And the Harry community toilets, they're already having issues last summer with buses,
Yes.
buses there
Yes.
every day.
And not to be the bearer of bad news, but Charlie also said they're not fussed on the Kakapoto one either, so.
Otherwise, fine. They've had numerous issues with that, so that has to be, if they're going to go there, it has to be fully self-contained, but they get in there and they get jammed in, and then we've had to have tractors go and assist them to get out.
And I think, I know we're going through the list, but I think the reality we've got to make peace with is the fact that a lot of these places are going to be remote, they're going to be hard to monitor, they're going to be hard to enforce, and if we do try and do that, that's going to add cost as well. How is that cost recouped, et cetera, so.
But there's also the one aspect that you just can't ban everybody.
No.
Well, the grounds for doing so are health and safety and the environmental and cultural piece. I guess proximity to sea, to river, to lakes prevent some of these sites, but not all of them. Public access and general health and safety can be taken into consideration, but how that scores or adds into the matrix is questionable for some of these sites.
The pub in Harry, I think it's $5 to $10 to park.
Yeah, Brownie charges $10 a night for people to park their wagons at the pub and to have a shower as well. It's not a huge cost.
I think another thing Thrive said to take into account is the spread of sites. We don't want to have them too far apart, and then we push people to illegally park somewhere or dump somewhere where there's not facilities. And particularly the Kakapoto one, it's very popular on Camper Mate and all those places.
At what point do we have to take responsibility for other people's irresponsibility? If I leave Hokitika 20 minutes late to get to a meeting in Harihari and I choose to drive 130 kilometres an hour to get there on time, whose fault is that other than my own? And should I not just be reprimanded for it by the police for breaking the law and not taking responsibility for my own behaviour? That's our role as a regulator. It's to enforce the laws. It's not to take responsibility for other people's lack of responsibility.
I know, but you still have to enforce it at that cost.
Okay, so for these 3 sites, can you increase the score in any of the 3, protecting the area, protecting health and safety, or protecting access? That's the question you have to ask yourself. It can't be that the community don't want it. It has to be those 3 things.
It's not to say that the community doesn't want it, but it does seem striking to me, and, you know, for a government that waxes lyrical about localism, by God, does it not really like enforcing it in practice? And you've got a camping ground just down the road in Ross, you've got a pub nearby that provides effectively camping ground services, you've got camping grounds around Harihari, and Kakapotahi is only halfway in between. It does seem striking to me that we just have to live with it and we can't manage this in keeping with what we know our community, members are saying that they are keen on. But anyway, I just think we do what the lawful requirement is, and I don't think we need to go too far above and beyond that, frankly.
You still have to watch the scores up in those 3 areas to take it up. That's the thing.
To assess under those scores.
Yeah.
The thing is, we take them out and
identifying zones then. So
looking at council-wide land, and as I said before, we looked at whole sites, reserves, public toilets, all that stuff. Yeah.
With Ross and the situation with the hotel there, I know that a lot of people camp beside the lake and opposite the hotel. How does that work? Like, do they pay the hotel, or they're obviously completely self-contained? Does anyone know?
A lot of them go and park by the Chinese lake, by the rugby grounds too.
So it's still not going to be a place like that. Okay. I don't know. The Kakapoto is.
Kakapoto had, there were people in the community that were quite happy with people freedom camping there. The main ones I spoke to that were really against it last time were at the Bushman Centre, and I don't think there's a camping ground at all there now anyway.
Up behind it, there is. You still let the vehicles park up behind the Bushman Centre. There was a camping ground there last year. He's letting people there, there's people.
Is there a full camping ground?
No, I never was.
But still, it's not whether community wants it or not. That's not part of the criteria for evaluating.
No.
So
then
those 3
why are we
there
trying to cost
are
out
fine.
Kakapoto?
Well, it's going up. So what, we're putting those out for consultation?
Well, even when we put them out to consultation, the community are going to come back and say we don't want them, and say we can't listen to you because.
What's the point of consultation?
On that point, has any other council not just rolled on over and taken this, like it seems like we're going to be in line for doing as well? Like, surely there's enough councils around the country that aren't supportive of this, that push back to the government and say, at best, you can fund the enforcement of this so we can actually police it, as opposed to just, cool, here's another directive out of Wellington where it's going to cost our district in many different senses of the word, financially, as well as all the issues that get left behind, and creation of the bylaw and workshops like this. Is there anyone else, or, I guess we're not part of LGNZ anymore, but I suspect there's others that are probably looking to push back on this, or have pushed back on this?
They probably are, but unfortunately the staff here can't assess that right now. That's a councillor-driven action.
The consultation document, it clearly states the criteria independent check on. So you can't just send a submission and it says, I don't want it in my backyard. You could do an assessment that we have missed, that raises some issues, according to that criteria, and they could come back and we could then say, oh, we didn't realise that issue, and then
I don't know.
that's how they could submit on that basis. Or they could suggest an alternative.
As Alicia said at the start, it's not the staff's call whether we want it or don't want it. We just have to get a bylaw in place and have.
Or you could not have a bylaw, but then people, the current bylaw is fully expired, so people can do whatever they want. So we can do bylaw. Okay, so these three in or out?
I don't know if we can justify taking them out.
Hang on, what was Chisholm and Stone said we have to have the number that have been put on the list?
That's what I was trying to work out.
You've put a certain number of suggestions up, but what's Chisholm and Stone tablets brought down from the mountainside that says we have to stick to that number and we can't reduce it?
Just based on our interpretation of the criteria.
Okay.
That's if you expose yourself to litigation from unfettered MCA, all right?
We can provide you with a full list of whatever if you want.
Okay.
I've got a 4 o'clock meeting I've got to jump off to. I'll see you guys next time.
Yep.
Thanks, Ash. Bye.
The heliport has no toilet there. It's got public toilets sticking there by the heliport. There are no toilets down the heliport.
They just left that outside.
Path that goes up to the toilets.
A fair way away. I would classify that as not having toilets.
100 metres.
Yeah, in the rain. They'll go in the bushes. That's where they go.
It's no different than any other campaign.
Yeah, but if they're self-contained.
Toilets or.
That's what I'm saying. You've got to look at it and say, do they have to be self-contained or not? I mean, to me, I would classify having public toilets by the heliport because they're actually quite a hike away, unless you're going to make the car parks right in front of the entrance to the pathway.
You can just make franchise of self-contained only. You could do that with all the sites. There's nothing stopping us in the Act from making all our proposed sites only self-contained. We won't get in trouble for that.
Well, I would be making it self-contained only there because I don't regard those public toilets as being close access.
I agree, there's plenty of space there.
Yeah.
Which gets them, relatively.
Bruce Bay is across the road. It's less a distance there than it is from the heliport to the toilets in Bruce.
It's got also
That's a cultural
pool that
with the Mariah's down the road.
happy about.
Right.
Already highlighted.
Bruno seems to work.
Bruno's
well.
fine.
Yeah.
Bruce Bay's got to go for conversation.
Oh, it's not a good solution.
Including them in consultation doesn't mean include them in the final.
No. And the public is kind of reasonably okay about them because when we put the toilets in, that was regarded as being where the camper vans parked, it's asked. Yeah.
Alright, so you happy with fast?
Yeah.
Okay, and then my final slide is just around, if you want to proceed with the bylaw, then if you want everything in place before Christmas, if you want a bylaw in place, then it needs to be accepted in council in the next council meeting, among consultations I previously stated, and then a hearing on the 5th of December, and then adoption on the 17th of December in your last council meeting.
Just asking this so I can understand our options fully because I'm ignorant on many things, including this. If we don't have a bylaw, what's the worst case scenario?
Everyone can camp anywhere they want if they're certified self-contained within 200 metres of an accessway.
And an accessway is not just a driveway, an accessway is a river, beach, anything like that?
Pretty much anywhere.
Accessway.
Which is why I restricted all the townships, so that you can't have someone camping outside your driveway.
Yeah.
And you can't give them tickets. We can't enforce.
Yeah, so if they're not certified self-contained, then they are breaking the law, right? Yeah, okay.
I think that's a good idea, even if they are near toilets and whatever, they do have to be there.
So bullet.
Not near public toilets.
Yep, so we can have certified self-contained for every site. That's an option. That's on Schedule 2 of the bylaw. We can also choose what hours. I think Kate put in 7 till 7 or something like that. You can change that if you want as well. And then the third one is the number of parking spaces at the site as well. We've estimated for and it's reasonable, but you can change those as well. That's the last group things for each site.
So, Jane, what were you saying, so if they're not self-contained or happy to be?
If they're not self-contained, then that's fine if they're by, they're close to.
Yeah, but then it's what's the difference open?
Well, I thought that's why we
Well,
were
we
putting
know the
there.
toilets need to be
Yeah.
open,
I thought that was half the reason of having those allocations by the public toilets was to control where they were. But other sites, like beside the Aohura Bridge, there's nothing there, so it needs to be self-contained. I thought that's why we were looking at it that way.
Well, I think realistically as well, a lot of the public toilets are going to be in the places that have got parking spaces and that sort of stuff as well. The question is whether you want to push the people who are, you know, effectively not in self-contained vehicles just into paid camping grounds and that sort of stuff, which.
And to be fair, councillors, remember, we have to enforce this.
Yeah.
So if we get complaints from the public or complaints from yourselves saying there's people staying down there, with nothing in place, or we make it all self-contained and non-self-contained, then we're going to have to enforce it, so we need a budget to enforce it.
And we had a freedom camper at Waitan Island this week, emptied. I'm not sure where he was going to the toilet, but he wasn't using my toilet, so he wasn't using your toilet with him.
Was there white budget?
No, he was not a white batter.
He was a freedom camper, said he was. So just to recap on that list, Kamara is yes. Aohura is a check on cultural impact.
And Milltown.
Hoki Beachfront is yes. Caspe's no. Sunset Point was yes. Milltown was cultural check. Woodstock Domains yes. Ross Hall no. Kakapatahi no.
No, it was.
We weren't sure about those three. We hadn't made a decision, did we?
No, we weren't too sure. They're questionable. Franchise of Heliport, self-contained only. Bruce Bay cultural, check on the cultural site. Moringa, yes. And Haast, yes.
I mean, the big one with the Ross Hall is that that's the car park for the
So
hall,
we need
which
to
is
check
used
on
for
those.
community.
Yes, and you're right, you're right, because if they put an event on, you've
Yeah,
got
some,
camping
like a squash or badminton, whatever it might be, bunch
Yes.
of park there.
Yeah, so there is a community impact on that Ross Hall one, because he's quite right, if there's an event on and you've got people parked there camping, the people that live there going to a meeting or a do or a function or anything else, they've got the entitlement to the parks, not camp events.
Yeah, so that falls under, as I said before, one of those criteria is access to the site as well.
Access.
Yeah.
Because as far as I'm aware.
Choosing one of those three.
Yeah,
So Ross may come out because of that.
And it's probably worth.
Community hall.
If you, hang on, I was just going to say.
I think they take photos.
Yeah.
Just suppose there's any cost or issue.
Highlighting all the sites.
Those are all the sites, yeah. We've gone
So,
through.
out of those three,
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see where the toilets would put that was.
That's
Yeah,
public,
yeah.
the hall itself is actually illegal for Ross Hall, I think.
At Sunset Point, I would like to see that having a later, finish, start time
Yeah.
at night, so maybe
I actually don't know that it's.
9 maybe for the summer at any rate.
Just a point on the, sorry, just the comment on the Ross Hall, that land that we're looking at the car park area, we need to check to make sure that that doesn't actually belong to the Ross community.
So the communities.
Just excluded it, so.
Yeah, okay. Now, the other thing is too, is with the Harry Hall too, you've got summer sports, etc. at the Domain. So depending on, that can be an interference with access and use of their community hall. It is their community hall.
So maybe a more restrictive time frame.
Do we get away with removing Ross and Harry without too much risk? Because of that criteria? So
Yeah, yes.
probably safe to remove those.
Yeah. Because we can't impinge on the community's right to their hall and their use either.
One thing that Charlie did say, and again, we're speaking on anyone's behalf, but is that I know that you have the criteria for public toilets and that sort of stuff, but by the Domain and this is stuff, I mean, again, no, it's a sports field and this sort of thing, so yeah, it all gets nippy, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, just by the lakefront, yeah.
And a lot of people do camp by the rugby ground.
Yeah.
If you're happy with camp for the site, then we could try exploring the other two.
Yeah.
That'll be my recommendation. based on
We'll see what
discussion.
comes about the consultation, because I know Councillor Monero won't be happy with that, but anyway, we'll see where that goes.
Yeah.
Well, he's not here, he didn't show
Well,
up.
now the other thing is too with that is For the Kepa Cottage one, okay, so people go all the way down to the beach and then they get into Stripe and they put some boulders there to stop that beach access. Are they allowed to do that as a community? People were going right down to the beach.
Versus the beach.
Unfortunately, that's a regional council issue.
Because that was an issue, that has been a long time issue, because they've had to pull people out with tractors, because they go and park on the beach. Forget about the tide coming in. So, with that, Alicia, where you've got all the other ones to do with the, green areas identified and in and out, do we need to revisit any of those?
Only if you're not happy with this. Basically, we just prohibited all of the townships and allowed for these areas that we've just gone through now, because I didn't think you'd want people camping outside your door.
So I was just trying to look at, because I'm just thinking also to two conversations I've had with two other residents is just down for me, access to the beach at Ruatap. There's camper vans parked there consistently.
What's that?
When you go onto the beach at Ruatap. South side, yeah.
So we can add areas.
South
Well, it's not on here, but they're doing it.
Down by the, sorry, Takatai then. Takatai.
So we can add
That
areas.
district is Ruatap.
No?
Yeah, it's South Spit, by the golf course, yeah.
Yeah, Bruce Watson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you can remember, Tanker, South Spit still was there in 1920 when the sawmill was.
There's been excluded, I think, because of access.
No, it's not.
So we can add additional areas if you want to ban them. That's
Well,
fine.
camper
But
vans
I can't
go
go
there.
around the whole district, and I can't drive around every road.
And there's no toilets there.
And fairly
That's
close
what,
links
these,
to the Cossack.
these sites have been specifically selected because they meet more of the criteria than a lot of other sites.
Yeah.
So that's why.
So we're putting forward ones that have been selected as being suitable to go through. And then we've got the ones where you've gone through, got restrictions on freedom camping in some areas.
So the restrictions are those sites there.
Yes.
Yep. And now we're talking about the prohibited areas. So I just prohibited all our townships, excluding those areas. But we can exclude we can prohibit other areas as well if you want. So if you have got no issues with down Ruatap, then I can draw a square around your
If you
little
want to make Sunset Point self-contained only, we could do that.
In terms of prohibited, there must be, council must hold some information about current sites that are prohibited. Because this site at South Spit Road currently has a sign up there saying camping is prohibited. Where's the district sign? So,
I don't know where all the signs are, but
so what I'm saying is there are areas that are already identified as prohibited by
But it's
council.
not on that drawing.
This is what I'm asking. Council must have that information somewhere.
So the drawing you've got, the restriction for Hokitika, you've got what Riley's saying is there's a sign prohibiting camping, but it's not prohibited in your drawing.
yeah, so there's also, can you bring up
And
the
the old
bylaw?
ones,
I think it's just the correlation between the old bylaw and the new bylaw that we're proposing, so there might be a few anomalies.
like Okarito is prohibited, but the whole road was prohibited from highway to Okarito.
All I want to do is make sure that it's captured under the new under the bylaw we're proposing.
We can always change the signs and do whatever we.
You will have to call signs in because there's still signs out that say.
Yeah, but they might be in places where we want to continue to prohibit it.
But that particular location has an access problem. That's the issue. So it needs to be prohibited. So how do we capture that in our
Because
discussion?
everywhere will be prohibited, except the ones we've allowed.
Probably need to do a review of all
Yeah, we'll
current
review.
signage out there to make sure it correlates with the proposed bylaw. But we can extend the ban out to Ruatap so that it's in line with those signs. Just kind of combine.
But I mean, this is one issue. It's only because the person that lives there's rung all of us and told us about it. These issues, I'm sure, go further across the district.
It'd be easier to exclude all the way to Ruatap because there's an access way by the Hanapur Hotel,
Yes,
which
there
is
is.
also an issue.
Yep.
So the best way would be just go read all the way down to Ruatap.
It's not an issue really if it's just self-contained ones.
But I mean, then you do, there's beach access from here all the way to Kamara. Do you prohibit all them?
Then we probably start getting into the risk of banning too much and getting into too much
That's
trouble.
what I mean. That's what I'm
It's
saying.
kind of
That's
like-
excessive.
Thrive suggested banning the towns, we'd probably get away with that, because it, like, people don't want camper vans outside their house. But we couldn't go and ban every single beach access road because we don't want freedom campers there.
Well, we can say something like we would like to ban freedom camping within 200 metres of the beach, a lake or a river or something like that.
Here will be quite a lot of places, I think.
Yeah, well, you can, so.
Well, that's a better way, what Jeff was saying before, isn't it? Rather than do the long narrative, do the short one.
Yeah.
Within 200 metres of whatever, freedom camping is banned.
So one other thing that Thrive commented on was actually writing to or talking to the Motorhome Association. I mean, this council has a relationship with the NZMCA as a motorhome friendly town. So I think it would be beneficial to write to them and say, hey, this is what we're proposing, you know, what are your...
Hi, friends.
So what's on it? Yeah, hi friends.
It has to be distributed quite quickly.
We can send them a copy of the consultation document along with the material and I'll advise them that, hey, please review this and see.
Yeah, we've got nice friendly users saying, so we are a motorhome friendly town, we want you to...
We've got the badge.
Is there, forgive me for voting into the Act, but do they take into account to any extent peculiarities of different districts of the country?
Not at all.
It's just like,
It's very rigid.
yeah, it's just, I would hazard a guess, and it sounds like it's irrelevant. No, I just think, yeah, very much so. Present company included, but the.
I was just going to say, did you say you were?
Oh, absolutely bizarre, but the,
We are live
no,
streaming.
but just in terms of the ratio of, say, visitors, freedom campers, etc., to residents and ratepayers and stuff, it is remarkably high. I'd argue it's probably the highest in New Zealand, it'd be certainly the top few, so it's kind of, it's a lot for a small rating base to try and carry.
That was acknowledged by MB in that we got traditionally the highest proportion of that fund in the district.
We did do very well with it.
Yeah.
And then they just took it away.
Good luck with this.
Okay, so let's just circle back. Did we land on the self-contained versus non-self-contained? Are we happy to leave it in the bylaws? So we've got certified self-contained where there's no toilets, no amenities, and we've got non-self-contained where there's toilets. We're happy with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're happy with operating hours except for the ones at Sunset Point, or do you want all of them changed?
I think
I think-
should be expanded in the evening.
It was only for that small car park by the toilet, it's not the whole, so I don't see it being an issue.
It was just that, okay.
So we're basically staying at 8 PM to 7 AM on all these recommendations and timeframes.
Try and keep it simple, I think.
That's what we have done at this
It
point.
really needs to be standard, otherwise we're going to lose the message, aren't we?
And I also, I know it adds a cost to the ratepayer, which I'm not happy about, but it would seem to me to defeat the whole purpose of the exercise to have these non-self-contained vehicles parked next to public toilets to only, and then restrict them to certain hours of the evening and for that to very much overlap the hours that the toilets are shut as well. I mean, that just seems to completely defeat the purpose. If the idea is that you put them there to try
We'll
and
do
keep.
it, we'll have,
Yeah.
once it gets certified, we'll change it.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that much more cost because we can shift the cleaning.
Oh, and realistically, how much do you get if you go in the night, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, so
But at least it lines it up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Public toilets,
And to be fair, if
non-contained.
there's campers there, the chance of vandalism, etc. drops.
Yeah.
Because there's some.
Yeah.
I think we finished, unless there's any more comments.
You've been standing a long time, people.
Yeah, she has. Thank you, Alicia, and Kate, for your work with this, and for getting up and doing the deadly deed with having to talk and contain everybody that's here. So, no, great job, well done, because this is not your,
When you get a new group manager regulatory, they can have it.
so no, well done, because we've got to do it, we've got to be responsible. So you're quite happy with the decisions now for re-scoping what you've got in here for consultation? Okay. And the other thing too with that is that as far as ongoing conversations with those out there, is that you've got a better understanding of what the whys and wherefores are with this. Because there has been,
Just another edict going from Wellington, basically.
but I am pursuing Ministry of Tourism, as I said before, with other councils around the country, but I'm doing it independently as well, looking at putting pressure on government to reinstate that funding for monitoring the Freedom Campaign sites. It's absolutely shite that, we just have to carry the can, that the burden falls on the ratepayers, because it's not just monitoring, it's the rubbish, it's the toilets, it's all the other added costs. Leslie sitting there smiling.
Does the,
last three.
does the IVF distribute to district councils or not? International Visitor Levy, does that get distributed out to councils or not?
No, that's not.
Pushing for it.
Yes, the Minister of Tourism might be diving in, right?
Did I say not too good? What is that? Oh, did I? I have to spell it. Sorry. Sorry, she's quite not good with that word.
Was it?
Well, yeah. Sorry. About that, I forgot we were live streamed.
Live stream.
My apologies.
Minister of Tourism.
Yeah, so there's a lot to do, but I mean, the conversation's only going to heat up with everybody out there as well, so, let's manage them well. Yeah. All right, thanks, Alicia.
A lot of us hear comments from people in the community saying we don't want freedom campers, but there's also a lot of people in the community that do want to be able to go freedom camping both here in our district, because it's so long, and in others, like in the community.
Yes, and also it's been in the paper, there's been some that go freedom camping themselves in a camper van, it's self-contained, that take a bit of offence of the labelling that goes on, so.
And as Kate's Beard told me this morning, they can take photos and things like that and post about cool locations at Sunset Point, etc., and it goes viral all over the world. Yes. And it does help with everything.
We had a local woman that was taking her rubbish down to Sunset Point last year, the year before, sometime around then, and she was photographed and clipped, so it was easy to track her down. But like a fly tipper that puts their mail out and their rubbish, quite easy to trace them back.
My father did the other day. All that's on live stream.
Yeah. All right, thank you.